For decades, it's been one of those relationships in global politics that everyone talks about, but that never quite lives up to the hype. But now, something's different. The European Union and India, two absolute giants, are finally getting serious about a partnership that could completely reshape the way the world trades and operates. This is the story of their trillion-dollar handshake. And that right there is the big question we're digging into. After all these years of false starts and stalled talks, what's suddenly pushing these two behemoths together? Well, the answer is this complex dance of economics, geopolitics, and a really powerful shared vision for what the world should look like. Okay, so let's get into it. This relationship didn't just pop up out of nowhere. The journey actually started way back in 1994, got upgraded to a strategic partnership in 2004, and then they started talking about a free trade deal in 2007. But then, crickets. For almost a decade, the whole thing was basically dead in the water. The very fact that talks kicked off again in 2022 and that there's a real deal on the horizon tells you that something fundamental has shifted on the world stage. So what exactly has been reimagined here? It's not just about dusting off the old plans and picking up where they left off. No, both sides are coming to the table with a whole new sense of urgency and a completely different strategic game plan. I mean, the numbers are already massive. Last fiscal year, we saw trade in goods hit over $136 billion. That's a huge figure, right? But what's wild is that both the EU and India see this as just the warm-up act. It is a tiny fraction of what they think the real potential could be. And this slide right here really puts it all into perspective. Just look at the EU's trade with China and the US. We're talking over 700 billion euros each. Then you look at India, the most populous country on the planet, and it's only the EU's ninth largest trading partner. That enormous gap between India and the top dogs, that's the prize. That's the opportunity both sides are now racing to grab. But listen, this isn't just about shipping more boxes back and forth. It's about building a totally new kind of economic alliance, one that's built on a really unique and powerful synergy. And this brings us to this key idea that people are calling the fit partnership. See, unlike some other relationships, the EU and India aren't really competitors. Their economies are what you'd call structurally complementary. They fit together almost like perfect puzzle pieces. So here's the crucial point. They basically cover each other's weaknesses. The EU brings the high-end machinery, the advanced tech, the critical industrial parts. India then takes all that and uses its massive manufacturing base to turn it all into finished goods like cars and phones, things that Europe doesn't really produce at scale anymore. It creates this incredible engine for growth for both sides. But if it's such a perfect fit, you have to ask, why did it take so long? Well, that's because just beneath the surface, this partnership is a minefield of some really deep, long-standing disagreements that have stopped progress for years. And believe me, these are not minor issues we're talking about. These are fundamental clashes over everything from climate policy and patents to farming and data. Before any deal gets signed, negotiators have to carefully walk through every single one of these tricky spots. One of the biggest battlegrounds, for sure, is intellectual property. Specifically, the EU is pushing really hard for something called TRIPS Plus provisions. Now, these aren't your standard global rules. They add extra layers of protection, like something called data exclusivity, that would make it much harder for Indian companies to produce cheaper, generic versions of existing medicine. And this quote right here, it just perfectly captures India's biggest fear. India is famously called the pharmacy of the developing world because it makes affordable, life-saving drugs. The worry is that these TRIPS Plus rules could completely tear down that model, making critical medicines way too expensive for millions, if not billions, of people. The friction doesn't stop with pharma, though. There's another huge point of conflict brewing over climate change, and it's all centered on a controversial new policy from the EU. This is the big clash over the EU's Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism, or CBAM. Okay, so for the EU, this is a core part of their Green Deal. It's a tax on carbon-heavy imports like steel and aluminum. But for India, it looks a lot like green protectionism. They see it as a backdoor tariff that could add costs of up to 35% and basically wipe out any benefits they get from the free trade deal in the first place. So with all these massive challenges, how on earth are they actually making any progress? Well, they've adopted a new, much more pragmatic strategy. It's designed to untangle all these complex issues and just build momentum, piece by piece.
So instead of trying to solve everything in one gigantic, messy deal, they've cleverly split the talks into 3 separate tracks running at the same time. You've got the big free trade agreement, a separate one for investment protection, and a third just for geographical indications, protecting products like Darjeeling tea or champagne. It's a really smart way to get wins on the board while they keep hammering out the tougher stuff.
And it's not just about treaties either. They're also building brand new institutions to create trust and cooperation. The EU-India Trade and Technology Council is a perfect example. It's basically a forum where both sides can get in a room and align their rules on all the critical technologies of the future, like AI, green tech, and semiconductors. Okay, so let's zoom out for a second, because this partnership isn't happening in a vacuum. It is a direct response to a world that is getting more fragmented, more unpredictable, and way more competitive. The real driving force behind this entire thing can be summed up in 2 words: strategic autonomy. For both the EU and India, this is all about being able to carve out their own path in a world that's increasingly defined by the rivalry between the US and China. At its core, it's about not having to pick a side. In this whole quest for autonomy, it's being fueled by some major global shifts. There's a real desire to hedge against political unpredictability in the US, a clear strategy to de-risk away from supply chains that lean too heavily on China, and of course, a shared goal of keeping the vital sea lanes in the Indo-Pacific secure. This partnership is their answer to building some resilience in a very turbulent world. And we're already seeing this new strategic thinking produce real, tangible results on the ground. Take the India-Middle East-Europe Economic Corridor, or IMEC. It's a massive infrastructure plan to create a direct trade route connecting India to Europe. It is, without a doubt, a strategic alternative to China's Belt and Road Initiative, and it's the physical proof of this new partnership in action. Which leaves us with one final fascinating question. As the world's largest democracy and its biggest single market get closer and closer, they're not just signing a trade deal. They are actively building a new center of gravity in the international system. So, could what we're watching be the blueprint for a truly multipolar world? One where the global story is no longer written exclusively in Washington or Beijing? Well, that is the trillion-dollar question.